Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to our program today. Today, we'll be discussing 3 steps to lifting yourself up with a speaker, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and farm monk. We have 15 members on Zoom and 5 members watching live on Facebook. I have Shweka helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thank you so much, Jay. I'm so happy to be back here and looking forward to trying to lift myself up too. It's a constant endeavor, isn't it?
Yes.
It is for me. Yeah, so we'll be speaking within the context of the knowledge that's passed down through a series of teachers since antiquity, coming back to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's called the Golden Avatar. Avatar means one who ascends to help others. He was also a sannyasi or a monk. He was also known to be golden, Suvarna. So we've truncated that to the golden monk. So many of the teachings are under the umbrella of this great teacher of the process of Bhakti Yoga, making it simple so that anybody can practice it. And today I'll be going into the 3 steps that are required to ascend, to move up and actually attain one's pure spiritual consciousness. We're already pure spiritual beings, but in association with matter or the lower energies of the world, we begin to take on the qualities of matter. And then there's emotions like fear and anxiety, worry, and so forth. And that's just the beginning of it all. So the process of yoga means to reconnect with our original source, which is the source of us, the source of our consciousness. Yoga means yuj, or to connect together. That's my preamble for the day. And I have a little bit of knowledge that's in a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, but I think it's nice if before we hear it, which is one of the processes of yoga, is to hear. It's called Shravanam, that we get into a state of full concentration. What do you think? Volunteers? Okay. Thank you, Vicky. So let's try for a minute by sitting up a little straighter than we were a second ago. Just close your eyes and set aside any of the duties that you have to do. We're human beings, not human doings, after all. So give yourself permission just to be. And if it helps you, then bring your attention to your breath and just calm down. Calm your mind. Calm all the cells in your body. Calm your heart. Any emotions you have, just let them settle down. And just be there and be aware. And to help your mind become fixed, you can use the power of mantra in your mind and see the 2 syllables R-A-M-A, spells Rama. And in your mind's eye or with your mind's voice, your inner voice, repeat the syllables Rama, Rama, Rama. You can also say it out loud, or you can say it within your mind and just see the 2 syllables. And wherever your mind goes, bring it back to Rama, source of all spiritual strength. And now, in your mind, or if you wish to say it out loud, you can try the mantra Gauranga, as in Gauranga, and breathe, and then Gauranga, and repeat that mantra in your mind, and bring your attention to the mantra. Stay alert, but be relaxed. Let go. Don't be attached to anything. And notice that you're pure awareness. And now stay in that state, and I'll read you a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. One should see that the material world is a distinct illusion appearing in the mind, because material objects have an extremely flickering existence and are here today and gone tomorrow. They can be compared to the streaking red line created by whirling a fiery stick. The conscious being by nature exists in the single state of pure consciousness. However, in this world, the spiritual being appears in many different forms and stages of existence. The modes of nature divide the living being's consciousness into normal wakefulness, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. All such varieties of perception, however, are actually illusory and exist only like in a dream. Stay aware that you're aware. And also notice that you're being maintained, even as you sit quietly. Everything is going on around you in perfect order. Your heart is beating. Blood is pumping in your body. Your body's a phenomena. It's part of the material world, but you're not. You can objectify the body and even the mind. And all the life situations that you see around you are just passing by. And just take a moment to be grateful to be alive and to be maintained. And bring your awareness back to your breath. And one last time, say, Gauranga. And you can rub your palms together to get some external sensation. Open your eyes and come back into the room. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Hope you liked the verse. And now I'm going to go into the 3 steps that the Golden Monk describes as the ways to create foundational platform to lift yourself up. And there are Sanskrit terminologies for these. The first one is called Sambanda. Sambanda means a relationship. And we're conscious beings and we have relationships. There's a relationship we have with this world, actually. And this couple days ago when I was walking in my neighborhood, I was noticing that many of the doorways have packages that have arrived from Amazon. They're just sitting there. And I'm also aware of the fact that there's a way in which sometimes people make a living by going around and stealing packages off of doorways. It's become a phenomena in some places. And I was just thinking about our relationship with the world. So I asked my wife this morning, I said, why do people steal packages off of somebody else's doorway? And she said, ignorance. And as we discussed it a little bit more and we parsed the word ignorance, you can also pronounce it ignorance. Ignorance of the fact that it belongs to somebody else. So there's a way in which I'm able to transgress somebody else's rights or take somebody else's property if I just ignore that that belongs to anybody. And so there's a way in which the Vedas, the ancient books of wisdom, describe how this whole world, the whole phenomenal world of which our bodies and minds are part, and which everything we see around us is part. If I forget my relationship with it, or I forget it belongs to somebody, and I just think I can take it, use it in any way I wish, in essence, I can steal it and just usurp it. This requires ignorance of the fact that things emanate from a source, and that they exist, and not everything in the world is set aside as my quota. Those things that are set aside are usable by me. Everything else, I can't claim it to be mine. So this is one of the premises of the ancient wisdom literatures, is to see everything in the world for what it is. It's not mine, but I have a right to use it in service, and I should take my quota. So this is part of Sambanda. It's how I view the world. Some might argue, and have argued, I think very successfully, that one of the reasons that we have environmental crises is because people forget that whatever the world is, it has a connection to our original source, and it's not ours to manipulate in any way we wish. We have to respect it and use it in proper ways. Otherwise, if I get the idea that I can just take whatever I want, it's like stealing packages off somebody's porch. There's gonna be definite cognitive dissonance and a lot more. So relationship, Sambanda, what's my relationship with the world? That's important. And what is my relationship with my original source? This is the subject matter the Golden Monk said is important to establish. JM, can we have a slide? So I once heard a story about a person who put their deposits in the wrong bank account. It's actually a skit I saw. The person was working diligently for many years and collecting funds in a legitimate way, but putting them in the wrong account by mistake, off by one number. And when this person went to withdraw the funds finally for his grand goal, then he realized that he didn't have them because they were in the wrong account. So the lesson in the skit is that unless we have a clear idea of what our best interest is, no matter how hard we work, if we're putting our energy into the wrong account, if we don't understand our relationship with the world and actually who we are, and what is the root of our existence, and we're not able to water that root, we're going to miss the point. And that brings us to a few philosophical ideas that have been around since a time immemorial in the next slide, which prompt us to know ourselves, know who we are before we act. Because, for instance, in this context, if I think that I'm just a physical body and I put all my effort into sustaining my body, first of all, it's a losing cause. Not that we shouldn't be healthy. We should take the best of all the superfoods we can and exercise and get enough rest, take care of the machine. But if I think that my body is the all in all, and that's the most important thing in life, then I'll be so disappointed because the body's here today, gone tomorrow, and I'm not. And I can't expect it to be. So Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And there's a sense that humans can take the mask off and actually observe what they are beyond the body and see, what is my relationship with the world around me? And is there a more fundamental relationship I have that can be developed? This is called Sambanda, or relationship. So know where you are on the map. If you go to a mall and you look at a map and there's no little dot that says you are here, you're going to be disoriented all the time. Sambanda means to know where you are on the map, know who you are, not just what your body is, because the body is constantly changing, and there's a way in which we move from one body to the next, again, according to the ancient wisdom literatures, and we re-identify with the next body and say, now this is me. But there's another us that's beyond just the physical frame or the mind. So the Golden Monk said that in the sense that we're lost in the life situation that's before us at every moment, we forget about ourselves. We're so externally focused. And then by the power of our own attention, we move ourselves from one place to the next rather aimlessly. So the Golden Monk compared this to logs. A log can be floating down a river endlessly, and it just keeps going and going and going. But he said that we can eventually come to the shore. So the intention of those who take up the practice, some kind of metaphysical practice, is to come to this point of getting out of the wandering phase, or just floating in whatever direction, random direction the water takes us, and come to the shore, come to actual standing. We have a real standing, and it's not established by investing our energy exclusively in the material body or mind. We have an existence beyond that. So this is a really good question. Who am I? And it goes back to self-examination. Am I the body, or am I something that animates the body? And there's so many good descriptions about this throughout the wisdom literatures. They're commonsensical, and it's something that we can observe for ourselves with a little bit of attention. For instance, we did some introspection this morning. It's not so hard to look and notice that we're the observer of our own thoughts. We can be the observer of our body. And if you objectify your own body, for instance, take some homework and look at your hand and see, like, am I my hand? Do I exist beyond the hand? Why do I say my hand instead of I hand? Who is it that's the I? And this is an important starting point in Sambanda, said Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Golden Monk. Find out who you are, actually. There's joyfulness in just knowing yourself. According to the Bhagavad Gita, when one comes to an actual awareness, not theoretical, but when one is able to see one's own self, then there's a verse that describes the feeling. Should I say it? Okay, so it starts off by describing that spiritual awareness. It's called Brahma Bhuta. So Brahma means, for lack of a better word in English, spiritual. And Brahma Bhuta means the spiritual awareness. So then there's three symptoms that one will experience. The first one is prasannatma, which means natural joyfulness. Happy for no reason. There was an author I once went to hear, and she wrote a book called Happy for No Reason. And I didn't get a chance to read the book yet, but I love the title. There is a sense, we are joyful by nature. It's just when we get distracted by our life situation or start to degrade ourselves by thinking we're something we're not, like I am this body, then we forget about our independent spiritual existence beyond the body. But when we're able to just touch the web of that, our own awareness, our own indestructible nature as spiritual beings, which is a different energy from matter. We are different from matter. Then there's prasannatma. We become joyful. And then nashochati nakangshati in Sanskrit means there's no hankering or lamentation. Hankering means I need something else to make me happy outside myself. And kangshati means there's lamentation that I didn't get what I wanted. So that's a constant state of the mind. It's hankering for something, and after I get it, then I'm disappointed, because eventually either initially or eventually it disappoints me, because we're subtler than matter and we can't be satisfied by it. And finally, samak sarveshu bhute. So sama means equal, and sarveshu bhuteshu means that we're able to relate to people on a much different level than just I'm my body and you're your body. There's a lot of strife in that conception called the bodily conception, where we notice the differences and then we're repulsed or attracted according to the particular bodies that people have. But in this awareness of one's own spiritual nature, one also begins to see that whatever body one has, like, have you ever looked at a little bug up close? I was just in Michigan a couple of weeks ago, and they have fireflies there. Anybody seen those? You ever seen one up close? I had a little talk with one day because he landed on my arm, and I was looking at him and I say, I think he'll do better outside, because he followed me in. And I just noticed that his body was unusual. I could have gotten envious thinking, oh, you have a terrible looking body. Because of my bias, I think of a beautiful body is looking like this or that. And I look at the bug and I think, like, you're really ugly. But I resisted that. And I was just appreciating that there was a spiritual being inside. And he actually wanted to go back outside. And he also had a sense of defense of his existence. I may think it's insignificant, but he doesn't think so. He was eager to get back to his normal environment and so forth, and be happy. So the body is, of every living being, is a vehicle. This is the vision. Samak sarveshu bhuteshu. No matter what kind of body a living being has, what's animating it is something that's universal. It's a unit of consciousness. That's what we are, according to the Golden Monk. And we're part of the whole. Just like the sun is the source, and as the sun shines, there's an emanation of photons or spiritual or light particles that emanate from the sun. They're both one and different from the sun simultaneously. Should I say that again? It's a mind bender. They're one and different simultaneously. Because if the sun ray comes in your room and lands on your arm, you say, oh, the sun's touching my arm. Well, if the actual sun was touching your arm, you would be vaporized within a second. And at the same time, it is touching my arm because it's part of the sun. So the Golden Monk said, actually, we're like that. We have the same quality as our original divine source, as conscious beings, but the quantity is different. We're not the whole, we're part of the whole. That's Sambanda. Having that awareness, I'm not the whole, but I'm part of the whole, then we can develop our practice, because we have a clear idea of who we are. What is our foundational purpose in life? What's our existence? And so the Golden Monk said our foundational purpose is to connect with the complete whole in service. Okay, let's... Yes, please, go ahead.
Jason just put in a chat box, I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and love fireflies. They're cute, not ugly.
Jason, you're from the zoo. All right. They're cute, not ugly. Okay. Okay. Bring up a picture of a firefly, JM, if you would. Let's take a look.
Sure.
It'd be nice to see what a firefly looks like. And just appreciate, according to the Veda, the books of knowledge, there are 8,400,000 species. Hey, they don't look so bad. That's a firefly?
I typed in firefly. I don't know if it's firefly or not.
Yeah, I think so. Look at them light up like that. Actually, it's quite sleek.
Yeah.
Beautiful, right?
Yes. It's beautiful.
And I think he has little eyes on the front, and then an antennae and so forth. So look at the bug, and in this concept, samak sarveshu bhuteshu, that the Bhagavad Gita says is a symptom of one's spiritual awakening, is you'd look at the bug and think, oh, there's a person in there. Not that just this is just like an annoyance, an inconvenience, or whatever, but actually there's a conscious being within every animated body. That's what's animating it, is the conscious essence that's there, that's part of the original source, which is the supreme consciousness. Okay, so feel free to ask questions, to expand the conversation, or anything you hear that resonates, particularly if you find any phraseology or an idea that you say, okay, that could work for me. I'll take it out of here in my pocket. And if somebody asked me what the talk was about today, this is the one thing I'll say. I got this one thing out of it. So you all have to get at least one thing out of today's talk. Otherwise, I'll feel I've missed the mark. So try to get one thing. Oh, look, Subhadra is in the chat. JM, would you read it, please?
I put myself in their shoes, and it's uncomfortable to think about. So they are a little creepy.
Well, as in creepy crawly, I mean, they have to creep around, but they do fly. But they definitely have their particular body, and everybody does, right? Jason, we must all learn to shine. Go ahead, JM.
Yeah. Jason says, we must all learn to let shine our inner glow like a firefly and be a light to others that might need it.
Yeah. And it's one of the, it's our nature to shine forth. In fact, I was visiting somebody's home in Sacramento, and they had taken to putting various sayings on their walls in different places. And when I walked into the washroom, there was a stencil on the wall that said, "You were born to sparkle." I took that one away. I like that. You were born to sparkle. And I thought, hey, that's pretty good. Because what actually sparkles about our existence? It's our consciousness. And that's what shines forth. It's not the body. The body is animated by the conscious. As soon as we leave the body, then the body's no longer animated. But when the consciousness is pure, and we have this vision that we're connecting with everybody on a spiritual level, then we sparkle. I got one from Wolf. That's a big deal. Let's hear what Wolf has to say.
Wolf says, God is the great experimenter with a strange sense of humor.
That's true. Yeah, you look at all the species and everything that's going on, and definitely sense of humor. Yes, go ahead.
Andy says, aren't we all fireflies hypothetically lighting our own and other worlds somehow?
You guys are so poetical. Yeah, aren't we all fireflies hypothetically lighting our own and others' worlds somehow? Well, hopefully we light them and we don't extinguish them. It kind of depends on the mode of consciousness that we're in, because there are ways in which we can transgress, or we can be in a lower mode of nature through which we actually take away the light. So it's a thing, a real thing. It's an occupation to be an encourager, and to encourage on a spiritual level is very powerful, because that's the root of our existence.
There are a couple of more on Facebook. Colleen says, happy for no reason. And then Carrie Brendan says, I always get something every week during your sessions. And Pavitra says, you were born to sparkle.
Well, if you get something every week, then you have to share what it is.
Yeah, Colleen, go ahead and share. Sorry, Carrie, go ahead and share what you...
Otherwise, you only get half credit, although I'm deeply touched. Okay, I'm going to show a couple more slides because I'm aware that I'm chewing up the clock. And we go into some more particulars. I want to bring it to the practical level. So far, it's very philosophical. So what is the direction? Once we have Sambanda Gyan, we realize, okay, I'm not my body. I'm actually a superior energy, which is the consciousness. So what are we supposed to do? Well, that's the next point. It's called Abhideya. Abhideya means connect. Actually make the connection. So you are a particle of consciousness. I already said that. It bears repeating. You are part of the complete whole. You have a loving relationship with the complete whole. These are three tenets of the idea of Abhideya. And here's how to enact it. Let's talk a little more about the practice. First, though, before I go into the practice, I'm sort of jumping the line because normally it goes like this: Sambanda, Abhideya, and Prayojan. Prayojan is the ultimate goal. But how do we go somewhere? How do we take up a practice if we don't know what the goal is? If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Means you should have a clear idea where you're going. So it's a good idea to ask, what is my purpose? What is my goal? And one of the ways that we often govern our lives is by metaphor. Knowingly or unknowingly, we're governed by metaphor. In fact, I just finished an outstanding book called Shortcut, and it gives a history of metaphor in the world and how so many world events have been directed by metaphors, either taken a good direction or a bad direction according to the metaphor that we've taken up. So these are just a couple examples. There's a lot more examples of how people frame their life. Life is a race, life is a battle. Sometimes people say it's a journey. Have you ever heard anybody say life is a roller coaster ride? Yeah, that's it's like climbing a mountain. Some say things like life is a classroom. That's a kind of helpful metaphor, I think. Others might say life is like a prison. We can actually, Mia said, yep, roller coaster. So there are many metaphors that we can use, and they can all be useful if we look at them in the right way. But the Golden Monk talked about the goal of becoming a gardener. So when you garden, there's a sense of taking time to find good seeds, planting the seeds, watering the seed, nourishing, weeding, and so forth. And he goes into all this when he talks about our spiritual practice. The goal, for instance, of a lime tree, which I'm very fond. I think it's the most beautiful color, the color of a lime. I just love limes. I've always carried them with me wherever I go. And I love limes. So I put up lime plants in my yard. And one of the main goals of a lime plant is first it flowers and then the fruit comes out. That's the prayojan, or the goal. You plant, or I plant, a lime tree so that the lime will come out. So the Golden Monk said, as we're gardening, we want to know what our end goal is. And he said that it's prema. Prema means love. Love for the Supreme. It's naturally there. We have a relationship already, as I described, but then it requires a little watering and some cultivation to come to that point. And therefore, he gave this analogy or metaphor and said, yeah, be a gardener, become expert at gardening. And you have to be really careful as a gardener. You have to water regularly and so forth. And we'll go into that in a minute. So knowing what the goal is, then we can look into abhideya, or practice. And I'm going to go into more details of the practice in just a second, but let's come back to the Zoom room and stimulate some conversation. Means anything you heard so far that's stuck in your mind, or anything that you think needs a little more explanation or clarification, you can bring it up.
Jason says life is like a box of chocolates.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. That's another one. What else have you heard so far?
Gokul asks, how do we manage negative thoughts that pull us back into past?
Such a good point. So there's a way in which our minds are a repository of experiences, and we hold latent impressions within our mind called samskars. This is consonant with modern psychology, in which Freud, Jung talked about the subconscious mind and how powerful it is over us. there's a parallel in the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita Yoga Sutras in the concept of samskar. It means as we're moving about the world, we're taking in impressions. We're developing these and they stay with us. And the composite of all these impressions is what develops our general temperament, our predisposition to, and that means our likes and dislikes and so forth. So I may think myself independent in making choices. However, the Yoga Sutras say that no, actually, you're predisposed. You're impelled to make certain decisions right now because of your past. And that's called karma. Karma is pushing us in a certain direction. And how do we manage negative thoughts? Well, I mean, there's some ways superficially to manage them, just on a mind level. For instance, have you ever heard the admonition, nothing is as good as it seems or as bad as it seems? This is one of my favorite mantras. Do you ever have spikes during your day or week or month when something comes up and you think, oh, that's really bad. I'll never be able to overcome this. Somebody please say yes so I don't feel alone in that. Okay, well, one of the mantras is nothing is as good as it seems or as bad as it seems. Or even if it's something, a great windfall, we become all excited about it. Well, there's responsibility that comes along with that also that may be onerous in the end as well. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna teaches us that we should practice being sama or equal in happiness and distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. How do we do that? We just realize that I'm really an instrument in what is happening, and whatever comes up, I see it happen and I do my duty to the best of my ability. In other words, always do your best. If you've ever read the book called The Four Agreements, the last agreement the author writes about is always do your best. And some days your best may be, may be able to do more than in other days. However, as long as you do your best, don't worry about the result. It's not up to you. And what comes to you, even it out. Never as good as it seems or as bad as it seems, and don't be attached to the result. So that's one of the ways of managing negative thoughts that pull us back into the past. And the other way is to, as an example, if you have a glass of ink and you want to get all the ink, one of the ways to do is to pour in a pure substance. Let's say you pour in milk and you keep pouring it in, then all the ink is gone eventually. So when you put higher vibrations into your mind, it overwrites or it pushes out the lower ones eventually and it replaces them. Then your mind becomes easier to control. But I'll give you a metaphor that Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita. He said, be like an ocean, because the rivers are flowing into the ocean, but it doesn't become disturbed by the millions of rivers that are constantly filling it up. So he said, the ocean will stay steady. So similarly, stay steady as various kinds of impulses come into the mind. And you can practice this, actually. I'll give you a very specific example of ways I've thought about it. One of the urges that we all face that comes from the mind is the urge to speak. And if you practice this throughout a day, you'll really notice that urge and how strong it is. So one of the ways I've thought about it before is try to speak 20% fewer words during the day. Just see what that means to you. There are a lot of superfluous or superficial kinds of words that come into my mind I could just say to anybody at any time. But do I need to? Why not trim it back, starting with 20%? And just see if you notice the fact that, okay, I'm in control here and I don't have to say certain things. This is a way of controlling your senses that's recommended in the Bhagavad Gita is practicing with your speech. Another, this may be harder, but if you notice that, at least I have, in any given conversation, there's a way in which when somebody's speaking, I always want to bring the conversation back to myself. Somebody's talking about riding horses, like, oh, I used to ride a horse when I was a kid. Somebody's talking about investments, like, oh, I know how to invest here, I'll tell you all about it. Anything that somebody brings up due to the self-centeredness, it's like the idea of ego, like me, it's me. Try this. Try going into a conversation and keep it on the other person, unless they specifically ask you, what do you think about this particularly? Don't say anything except engage and appreciate what the other person's saying and see how that makes you feel. So these are ways superficially that we practice controlling the senses. We become aware that we have the power to actually decide at any given time whether to let them out or bring them back in. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives the example of a tortoise. It says the tortoise brings out their limbs when it's time to use them, and then brings them back in when it's not. So you can practice that and become more self-aware, and also see that you have the power to at least start the practice to control your senses. And if you can control speech, says Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, then all the other senses will start to come under control themselves. Are there other questions you see there, JM, or does anybody want to speak up? I love hearing from everybody here.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thanks for answering.
Oh, yeah, sure, Gokul. Thank you for such a nice question.
Thank you.
We have Wolf is asking how to approach the war in Ukraine, please. I was made there back in 1966.
Yeah. Well, we know a lot of people in Ukraine, and the way they're approaching it, many of them in the early goings on of the battle have relocated to other places, something I'm aware of, and I'm just trying to see through their eyes. And many of them are going on with their duties. In fact, we just lost 2 colleagues over there recently who were engaged in an extensive food program. They had like a free lunch program they were giving to weary people, and the building they were in got blown up, and they were killed in that attack. And how to deal with that is the way that we deal with all the various occurrences in our life, is to remember what our duty is and to continue on all circumstances. Of course, it may be our duty. Some of them took shelter in other places wherever they could, but even where they are, you do the best you can with what you have. And as far as the overall phenomena goes, if you look at history, the history of the world, it's demarcated with various wars. When I learned history, it was one war after another that defined their various points in history. And from the perspective of the Bhagavad Gita, these are prompted by the 3 modes of material nature. As I spoke earlier about the environment, why do we violate the environment? Because of low consciousness, being affected by ignorance and not understanding our relationship with it. And why do we encroach on other people's property and also have wars? For the most part, wars nowadays are political, and they have to do with usurping property or protecting various types of property. The wisdom literatures describe how these uprisings are inevitable, just as forest fires often start on their own accord due to friction or lightning bolt. So similarly, altercations happen in the material world quite spontaneously because of the zeitgeist, because of the way the material world is configured. And so it's an inevitability, ultimately, that these types of conflagrations will take place in this world.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wolf. Okay, a couple more points from the slides. Here's 3 bhakti yoga practices that will instantly lift you up. Remember, I promised in the title that there was going to be something about getting lifted. So there's a sense of connection through our relationship. And then what do we do about it? So these three are part of the first two especially, are the watering process if you're a gardener. So if you want to water the plants, hearing and chanting. So this is quite natural in any discipline. In fact, you may notice that during the thick of the pandemic, when everyone was locked down, nobody went anywhere, but they did meet and talk. That's what people do on Zoom in every group organization to make progress. They get together and they talk about where they're supposed to be going. Is that correct? It's kind of amazing, isn't it? Think about it. Like, how did you build a building? Well, we talked about it. Because first there has to be this sense of what's my goal? We're going to build a building. And then how do you get it done? Well, the ingredients are already there. They exist. How do you assemble them? You talk about it. You hear about it. And so in constructing one's spiritual practice, these are the foundational points. You hear, you chant, and you remember. So it's called Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Vishnu Smaranam. And so when you, and the iconic picture on the left, this was the occasion of the speaking of one of the most important wisdom literatures, and the person sitting on that ornate seat is called Shukadev. He had learned from his father this very powerful wisdom. And to his left is sitting a king named Parikshit, and Parikshit was cursed to die in 7 days. So then all the other sages had assembled because the Parikshit gave up his kingdom. He said, I have 7 days. I better figure out what I'm supposed to do now in the last 7 days. And everyone had a different opinion until this great teacher, Shukadev, appeared. He was actually the youngest among him. He was only 16 years old at the time. But everyone considered him the most enlightened. And he had learned from his father, Vyas, this wisdom. So they put him on this special seat, which is meant to indicate honoring the knowledge that he's speaking. And he spoke to Parikshit for 7 days. And this is an example of hearing and chanting. So Parikshit was listening, that's hearing, and Shukadev was speaking, that's chanting. So when it's spiritual subject matter, spiritual vibration, then what you get is this power of remembrance. So that excellent question that Gokul asked about managing negative thoughts and so forth, I talked about pouring the milk. So if you amend your hearing or you adjust what you hear, you'll notice that your whole life follows it. And if you're in a situation where it's very difficult to hear or you don't have a taste for it, you can start with just a little bit and then you'll develop a taste. And you'll notice the transformative power of sound. So there's mantra, like we did in the beginning. There's also hearing from these wisdom literatures that have been passed down over many generations. And this kind of vibration is extremely potent. And then when you repeat it, then that's the chanting part. And then you'll naturally remember it. And whatever you remember, whatever becomes prominent in your mind, that's the direction you're going to go. And I must say, if we can come back into the room just for a second, that somebody mentioned that, or they resonated with the idea that life is like a roller coaster. And so we'll always have this sense of ups and downs. Wars come, economic strife, and then things are up for a while, and then they go back down. So how do we handle all this? If you recreate your environment so that you can hear, chant, and remember high-minded sound vibration, the sound vibration that actually has its own potency, then you'll notice that you're able to rise above it in any given situation. You can actually take shelter of that process and be able to weather the storms of the material world. I even have even more specific information after that about the practice. I just want to see if you have any thoughts. And we're speaking about abhideya, or or getting one's own spiritual practice started. It's your own impetus that gets it going. And if you have an idea like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, then you can just implement it. What do you think? While you're thinking about it, I'm going to pour myself a glass of water. For all of you. Jam, long time ago, at the beginning of the pandemic, we put together a 21-day fitness challenge. I know a lot of people have taken it. I often when I'm traveling, people just come up to me and say, hey, I did the 21-day challenge. In fact, I'm doing it now. And this is an example of a practice. We put in that system, body, mind, and spirit. So those are three aspects of our life. And if we have something to hold on to, a goal for them, a prayojan, and then we take up the practice, then we'll notice that we're going to make improvement. Did we get any takers? Do you all want to say something? Yes, Vicky.
I've just begun my journey of hearing and chanting more, and I've realized that I've finally really just developed a desire to remember. And that's important, is to first have that desire to remember, because originally when I was chanting, I was thinking, please engage me in service. But then I realized I have to ask, please help me remember you before I can be engaged in service.
Yeah. And my spiritual teacher once said that the desire to desire is also, it's the same thing. And you could take that back with infinite regress. If you start somewhere, say, I desire to desire to desire to desire, then you're connected to the electricity. Yeah. And we can notice it ourselves. When you take medicine, you might first think might wonder, is this actually going to work? Because not all medicine does work. But then after some time, you might notice a little change and you think, could that be it? Could that be because of the medicine? And then when you say, oh, it's definitely working, then there's a way that you become almost an advocate of the medicine. So yeah, that works. It really did it. So when we see it for ourselves, that it's actually working individually, then it becomes very encouraging, because nothing succeeds like success, or as encouraging. Rajesh. Thanks, Vicky.
When in the very beginning, during meditation, when you mentioned about the temporary nature of this material world, it really struck me the most that, when you were saying at that moment, I literally was feeling exactly true. Everything is actually, temporarily outside. And I was wondering, why, majority, at that juncture, my consciousness pretty, wow, this is what it is. But, I am here, but I'm not part of this material energy. So I was just wondering, how to make it a little bit more permanent, the thought which, when we shared, when we were meditating, so that I'm consciously aware most of the time, so that whatever decision I make in my life or in the daily activities, it remain concentrated in that. So,
yeah, what a great question. The Bhagavatam describes the absorption in the life situation that's always changing to be abhinibheshita. We have a tendency to get absorbed, and our tendency is based on benefits-based marketing. What I mean by that is we expect to get something. We're generally don't do things without some motivation of what we're going to get out of it. And so when we correct our understanding about where we actually get benefit from, then it's our natural tendency to put our attention into it. Ever heard that expression, no cheese down that hole? I have a colleague who used to say that in meetings all the time. I guess it's from a famous book or something about self-help or management. No cheese down that hole. And so there's a sense of, when we develop this sense that there's no cheese down the hole of just staying absorbed in the material world, and we understand where my real benefit is, then it's our nature to turn our attention towards that, because we know where the cheese is. So that's why Sambanda Gyan, or knowledge of our relationships, is really important. And the Golden Monk said, along with the practice, the positive practice of chanting and hearing, part of the hearing process is hearing about our non-relationship with the material world, and that we have a higher relationship that is available to us. In fact, we're already in it, but we've just become distracted from it. Thanks for the question. And now for the last slide, because it's got some practical points and we're down to just a few minutes left. Here's some tips for practice. One is get into a routine. Routines are good. As long as the tenets of the routine are good, everybody does some routine. We work by habit. So amend those, get into a really healthy, think it out, engineer your own routines. You can get into a new routine if you stop and engineer it and decide, this is my new routine, and it'll take a little while to get it going, but that'll change the course of your life. That's pretty much common knowledge, isn't it? But it's good to be reminded, isn't it? And a friend of mine recently told me this: neurons that fire together, it should say wire together, not wife together. Although maybe, there's some context there of getting married to your neurons, but neurons that fire together, wire together. And there's a way in which, because of neuroplasticity, and I'm just talking about the mechanics of the brain, when we do something over and over again, we have a tendency to keep doing it because we get wired that way. So decide on a better routine and then do it and enact it. The next is make a list, 3 improvements each month. It's something magical about this. I've managed projects using this system. We call it ABS, always better service. But if you can think of 3 improvements you want to make every month, and then you put those at the top of your agenda, it's like, these are the 3 things I'm going to improve this month. Even if they're small improvements, you'll start noticing that you're moving in the right direction, and you feel optimistic about your life. And the third tip is to get a good start every day. Just as in track and field, when you get in the blocks, if you're going to do a 100-meter sprint, the start is really important. Get solid in the blocks and get ready to spring out. And in the morning when we get up, make a plan to start really, really in a aligned way. It's a funny way of putting it. I'm not barely speaking English today. What can be done? But get a good start every day. Plan it out. What's my start going to be in the day? Even if you just have, a spiritual ritual to start your day, you'll notice it. One of the things I do, as soon as I come to consciousness, I realize I'm going to get up now. And that's precipitated by my very special alarm clock I have that I recommend to everybody. You've probably heard me say this before, but it's an orb, and it starts to light up about a half hour, very subtly. It's like the sun rising almost, starts to light up the room about a half an hour before the actual time to come to awaken. And by the time it's that time, it's totally bright in there. So when I come to consciousness that I'm going to get up now, then I start my mantras. It's the first thing I do before I swing my feet off the bed, is to say my mantras and my affirmations. That's one way to start. And then if you have a series of other practices that you want to enact early in the morning, if they're small, line them up. So when you get up, you're moving towards it. For instance, I have a little box that has a bunch of recorded music and talks that are very helpful, spiritual. So that's the next thing I do. Turn on the light, turn on the box so the vibration's going. If you get the idea, that's one of the ways in order to stay in the practice is get a good start. And now here's some homework in the last 30 seconds. I did this recently because talking to a colleague of mine, and he just reminded me to go back over your goals. We may have set them before, may have left it out in the car, you may have forgotten about them. Go back and do this regularly, but here's your homework. Set goals for 3 months, 1 year, 3 years, and lifetime. One piece of paper for each one, and you only get 2 minutes for each. Set a clock to 2 minutes and don't second guess it. Just write whatever comes out, stream of consciousness. That's the first practice. And then look at it and see what's really on your mind, or notice that there's nothing on your mind. Okay. Somebody asked, Bagina asked for what are good mantras in the morning. There's several affirmations that we have. Maybe they're available somewhere. There's also, there's the mantras. We have the Maha Mantra. That's the one I do as soon as I wake up. And maybe JM can put that somewhere where everyone can grab it. Well, thanks, everybody. I'm deeply touched that you took your valuable time. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon. And in the meantime, please keep the transcendental vibration going, which is a phrase that resounds in the higher realms of the Himalayas, because the yogis who sit in caves there come out every once in a while, and they notice fellow practitioners on the high peaks of the Himalayas looking for fruits and roots to take back in their caves. And to encourage one another, they use this phrase, Hari Bol, which means keep the vibration going. And they raise their hands like this high in the air. And you can try this if you ever go to the Himalayas.
Haribol.
You can try it now.
Haribol.
Hari Bol.
Haribol.
Everybody, see you soon. Hari Bol.